At 2 in the morning in the Bahamas, phones were lit across a glass penthouse, while billions of dollars tried to escape at once. Customers were hammering the withdrawal button. Traders were watching balances freeze. Staff were calling counsel, backers, and each other. Outside, the sea was black and calm. Inside, an empire built on faith was running out of cash. Saul here. Months earlier, Sam Bankman-Fried had been seen as the odd new king of finance. He wore shorts to meetings, slept on beanbags, gave talks with tangled hair, and spoke with the calm of someone who had solved a game everyone else was still learning. The mess looked real. The awkwardness looked honest. That image was not a flaw in the machine. It was part of the machine. FTX had risen at the perfect moment. Crypto was loud, fast, and full of new money. Exchanges were becoming banks without being called banks. Tokens could be created, traded, pledged, and valued in the same closed world. FTX offered a clean app, bold ads, star backers, an arena name, and the promise that grown-ups had finally entered the casino. Behind the exchange stood Alameda Research, Sam's trading firm. The two firms were supposed to be separate. One held client funds and ran the marketplace. The other took risk. On paper, that separation looked sound. In practice, the walls were thin, the access was close, and the same small circle moved between both worlds. The Nassau penthouse became its nerve center. Young staff lived together, worked together, and made calls that could shift billions. Laptops sat beside takeaway boxes. Screens flashed through the night. Chats carried orders that would later look less like the work of an institution and more like the nervous pulse of a private kingdom. The kingdom had its own coin. FTT was the exchange token created by FTX. It could be held, traded, used for perks, and counted as an asset. As demand rose, the token's value rose. As the value rose, firms inside the empire seemed stronger. The circle looked elegant until one question entered the room. What happens when the empire is using its own token as proof that the empire is solvent? For a while, nobody powerful seemed eager to ask. Venture firms invested, celebrities promoted, journalists profiled the founder. Sam spoke about rules, responsibility, and giving away wealth. He donated, testified, and appeared beside people whose presence made him look safer. That was the real product, not only trading, not only access. The product was the feeling that this chaotic young outsider was somehow more responsible than the older banks he mocked. Every new endorsement protected the previous endorsement. Every serious backer made the next one feel less exposed. The narrative began carrying its own collateral. Users saw an exchange. Lenders saw a giant. Staff saw a mission. Backers saw the future. Inside the structure, user money was moving where users had never agreed it should go. Alameda could draw on FTX funds, take positions, cover losses, and continue operating while the app still showed balances, as if everything behind the screen were intact. The numbers on the screen looked like money, but a number is only money when it can leave. In early November, a leaked sheet from Alameda revealed how much of its apparent strength depended on FTT and other closely tied tokens. The file did not need to prove every fear. It only needed to make the market look again. Suddenly, the sleek exchange, the trading firm, and the private token no longer seemed like three parts of a smart system. They looked like one body using mirrors to appear larger. Then Changpeng Zhao, the head of rival exchange Binance, said Binance would sell its last FTT holdings. The message landed like a match in a room already smelling of fuel. Traders rushed to sell the token. Users rushed to withdraw from FTX. The empire faced the oldest test no branding can survive without real reserves: a run. No one there had much time. Sell, and the price fell. Hold, and the hold grew. Ask for help, and the truth got out. Wait, and the next user might ask for cash. Each move made the next one worse. By dawn, the game was no longer about growth or fame. It was about who got out, who found cash, and who was left with the loss. No suit, smile, ad, or old claim could stop the run. The brand was still on the wall, but the spell was gone. The withdrawal requests came in waves, first huge sums, then more. The sleek platform began to fail. Under the oldest test in finance, people wanted their money back. The exchange did not have enough ready cash to pay them. Inside the Bahamas offices, the mythology collapsed faster than the software. Sam tried to raise rescue capital. Calls went out to rivals and backers. A rescue by Binance appeared, then vanished after a brief review. The man who had once offered to save wounded crypto firms was now searching for someone to save his own. The reversal was vicious. Days earlier, his name had carried prestige. Now every photo, interview, and promise became proof of how completely the image had captured the room. The shorts no longer looked authentic. The messy hair no longer looked harmless. The casual pose that once signaled genius began to look like camouflage. Staff learned the danger through messages and news. Users watched withdrawals stall. Backers marked their stakes toward zero. Token prices collapsed across the market. Fear spread from one screen to another because nobody knew where the missing money had gone, who else was exposed, or which promise would fail next. FTX filed for bankruptcy. John Ray, the Enron restructuring specialist, took control and found a vast failure of basic controls. The glamour died. In its place were missing records, blurred ownership, poor accounting, private chats, and a setup where huge calls had been made by a tiny group. That concentration mattered. Power had not only been hidden behind tech, it had been hidden behind personality. The founder's image had become a substitute for process. He was the risk manager, frontman, strategist, rescuer, donor, negotiator, and moral voice of the empire. People were not simply trusting a company. They were trusting the coherence of one man's performance, and a performance can survive almost anything except a cash demand. The collapse exposed the cruel gap inside the story. The public had to believe the whole story. Sam only had to keep the story intact long enough for money to keep entering. Users saw balances. He saw the movement behind them. Backers saw growth. He saw how much control sat inside the private web. Reporters saw an odd founder. He understood the power of being unusual in a way that looked too odd to fake. The costume was cheap. The trust it produced was priceless. None of this required every person around FTX to understand the entire machine. That is why the failure grew so large. One group saw user cash, another saw loans, another saw token collateral, another saw public success. Each person held a part, and the founder stood where the parts met. When confidence was rising, the gaps between those parts looked like depth. When confidence broke, they looked like holes. The vault was not empty in the simple sense. There were assets, trades, tokens, investments, claims, and tangled positions. But the money users believed was waiting for them had been pulled into a different reality. It had been converted from something simple into something at risk, from cash into risk, from ownership into hope. That shift is where the psychological crime lived. People do not panic when they learn an asset is complex. They panic when they learn their certainty was borrowed. The FTX empire was built on narrative capture. Once enough people believed the story, they stopped inspecting the vault. The founder's image became an answer before the question was asked. Reputation became liquidity. Endorsement became due diligence. Confidence became a brief substitute for cash. Then the withdrawals arrived and stripped every metaphor away. An empire can live through bad press, bad markets, and a strange founder. It cannot survive the moment a mass of users demand reality at the same time, and reality is not there. Thanks for watching. If this gave you a sharper view of wealth, power, and survival, like the video and subscribe for more from the Aurelius method. I am Saul, and I will see you in the next video. Tell me in the comments, what made FTX more dangerous? The missing controls, or the story that made powerful people stop looking for them?